Well, hello everyone. Uh, Welcome to this class, and we are going to continue the third chapter, that is human reproduction. So far, we have seen the male reproductive system and the gametogenesis in male, that is precisely spermatogenesis, followed by female reproductive system and oogenesis, right? Now, in this video lecture, we will be discussing about menstrual cycle. Now, this is a very, very important topic. A lot of questions are asked every year from this particular topic. Okay, so in this third chapter, menstrual cycle is the most important topic. Okay, menstrual cycle and the gametogenesis, that includes both spermatogenesis and oogenesis. These are very important topics. Okay, so do study them, learn them very well. Okay, great. So let us start. The first thing is, what is a menstrual cycle, right? Well, where does it operate, and what is the function of this cycle, what it does? Great. Let us answer these questions first. So menstrual cycle, as it says, it is a cycle, right? So it will be a series of events that goes on and on and on, so they are in continuous loop, correct? Then only it will be a cycle. So precisely, it is a cycle, so it is made up of a series of events, okay, that continue themselves. And these series of events actually include the processes that are involved in the reproductive cycle of a primate female, right? In this series of events, there are metabolic reactions, there are processes that leads to the formation of ovum. Okay, it leads to the preparation of the uterus for the probable pregnancy. Okay, and if pregnancy happens, to carry forward this pregnancy. Okay, so menstrual cycle is a type of reproductive cycle that we see in case of primate mammals. Okay, so mammals have primates and non-primates. In non-primates, we have seen that the non-primate females have a special type of reproductive cycle called estrus cycle or heat cycle. Okay, and this cycle only operates in a particular season of a year, right? And that's why we call it breeding season, or we call such animals as seasonal breeders, right? Whereas in case of the primates or female primates, the reproductive cycle is continuous throughout the year, right? Every month it goes on, and such a cycle is called menstrual cycle. Okay, so first question was, where does it occur? It only occurs in primate females, right? In primate females. I hope you all know the primates, right? Primates, when we are talking of primates, actually we are talking about human beings. We are talking of monkeys. We are talking of gorilla, orangutans, bongo monkeys, macaques, okay, chimpanzees, apes. Okay, so these all are what? These all are primates. Okay, I hope you all know what are primates. So only in case of primate female, menstrual cycle is found. Okay, in non-primate mammal females, there is estrus cycle. Do remember this. Okay, so only in primate females such as human, chimpanzees, okay, gorilla, etc. Right? Great. Moving on to the next question was, what is it? We know that it is comprised of a series of events that includes the proliferation of ovarian follicles towards formation of ovum and the female gamete, as well as preparation of the uterus for probable pregnancy. Thirdly, we said it is a cyclic process. Now, if it is a cyclic process, so it has to repeat. What is the frequency of repetition? The frequency of repetition is 28 to 29 days. Okay, so every cycle in case of human female, so all these numbers are exclusively for human beings, human female. Okay, we are not talking about the menstrual cycle of chimpanzee or gorilla or any other primate. We are exclusively here going to talk about the human. Okay, and all the questions that are going to be asked from you will be only and only for the humans. Okay, great. So in case of human, this menstrual cycle is of 28 to 29 days. Now let me emphasize here that it is an average number. Okay, in some female it can be less than that, as less as it could be like 20 days, 21 days, or even shorter. These are found, these are reported. Okay, or in some female it can be more than 30 days, 35 days. Okay, so this the duration of one menstrual cycle is variable. Okay, it varies from, say for example, 20 days to like 35 days, but on an average, if we take the median value of all the population, okay, human population, we find that the average duration is 28 to 29 days. Okay, so it is an average duration. Great. So one cycle takes 28 to 29 days, therefore the duration at which this cycle will repeat itself will be the same, that is 28 to 29 days. Okay, so the repetition frequency of this cycle is of 28 or 29 days on an average. Great. Now I said that in menstrual cycle there are mainly two processes going on. First one is the maturation of ovarian follicle, and second is the preparation of the uterus for probable pregnancy. Right? Great. Let us see in detail what this cycle is. How does it look? What are the hormones? What are the processes that occur? Okay, let's dive in. Now, I would say focus in this case. Okay, let's see. So this is the diagram. Okay, this is the detailed diagram or figure for the menstrual cycle, which is given in our NCERT book. Okay, so whatsoever figures and facts are given in NCERT are of utmost importance to us, but let me tell you that even NCERT makes error. Okay, this book is not error free, so there is some error in this diagram as well, or in this figure as well. We will point out, we will study them. Okay, so let's look at this figure. Now can you see here, this entire cycle is of 28 to 29 days. Can you see at x-axis there is days, right? So it is time in days, 1 2 3 4 5 6, so up to 29 days. So x-axis is showing you the number of days. Y-axis is actually 4 axes combined together, right? So in this one figure, actually they are telling you or giving information about 4 different things, right? Number 1 is pituitary hormone levels. So how these pituitary hormone levels are changing in the menstrual cycle. Okay, so the first one is showing the pituitary hormone levels. Second one is showing the ovarian events. Okay, so it is showing what are the things going on, what are the events that are going on inside the ovary during this 28 or 29 days cycle or menstrual cycle, right? Particularly, they are going to tell us about the ovarian follicle. Okay, what is going on, how these ovarian follicles are changing over this time period or over this cycle. Great. The third one is showing you the ovarian hormone levels. Okay, so it is showing you the hormones that are secreted by the ovary, that is particularly they are talking about estrogen and progesterone. Okay, however, we will not limit our discussion to the estrogen and progesterone. We will also include inhibin. Okay, but that is later. And the fourth one is showing you the uterine events, right? So what are the things or what are the events that are going on in the uterus? Okay, so here we will be focusing mainly on the inner layer of the uterus, that is endometrium. Okay, and somewhat we will talk about the myometrium. There will be no changes on the epimetrium. Remember, when we studied in previous lectures about the female reproductive system, when we were talking about uterus, I told you that the uterine wall is made up of three layers: epimetrium, myometrium, and endometrium. Okay, outermost, middle, and innermost is endometrium. Correct? So here our discussion is limited mainly to the endometrium and myometrium. Epimetrium has no changes, so we are not going to discuss about that. Okay, great. Now let us see one by one how these things happen. Actually, these all are interrelated. All these four parameters are interrelated with each other, and that's why all these graphs are superimposed, so that you can see that when a particular event is occurring in the ovary, how the pituitary hormone or the ovarian hormone is doing. Okay, what are their levels? At the same time, what is happening in the uterus? Okay. One more thing I would like to add here is all this ovarian follicle development or the uterine development, that is whole of this menstrual cycle, is actually controlled by these hormones. Okay, the hormones of ovary and pituitary, that is FSH, LH, estrogen, and progesterone mainly. Okay, let us see. Now, if you see this graph or figure, what you find here is the x-axis is divided into three phases. Okay, that is the entire menstrual cycle is divided into three phases. Okay, can you see here from 1 to up to 5? Okay, so let me take a marker here. Yeah, so from day 1 to up to day 5. Okay, this phase is called menstrual phase or menstruation. Menstruation is the process. Okay, the phase is called menstrual phase or bleeding phase. Okay, so the first phase here, okay, is menstrual phase or bleeding phase. Now this is the phase when the female bleeds. Okay, so there is blood and some tissue which flows out of the reproductive organ, mainly through vagina. Okay, so it flows out of the body. Since blood and tissue is flowing out, we call this phase bleeding phase or menstrual phase. Okay, the process is called menstruation, and sometimes we also call it menses. Okay, we also call it menses. Okay, how long this phase lasts? It lasts for around 3 to 5 days. Okay, this is the fact given in NCERT, 3 to 5 days. Now it actually differs from female to female, from condition to condition. Okay, for some female it may last for 3 days, for some it may up to 4, for some may for 5, for some it may go even up to 7 days. Okay, in certain conditions it goes for a lot of days, some tens of days. Okay, so it really matters, but in normal healthy condition The bleeding phase usually lasts for 3 to 5 days. Great. Now, why it happens? What is that? We will come later. Let us first see the overview and then we will go in more detail. Now, the second phase starts from day 5 or the end of bleeding phase up to the day 14, okay, or the day of ovulation. Now, this phase is called follicular phase, okay. This is called follicular phase or proliferative phase. Why we call it follicular phase? Because this is the phase in which the ovarian follicles are developing. Okay, so for the ovarian follicle, it is called follicular phase. At the same time, that is simultaneously, inside the uterus, the endometrium lining is also developing. Okay, so endometrial hyperplasia is taking place. Okay, that's why it is called proliferative phase. Why? Because endometrium is proliferating. The cells of endometrium is proliferating. It is becoming more vascularized. The entire endometrium layer becomes thick. Okay, can you see here? This is the endometrial layer at day 5, and now it is increasing. Can you see? It is becoming more and more thick and more vascularized. So this is proliferation of the endometrium lining and hence called proliferative phase. Okay, now since this phase is immediately before the ovulation, we also call it pre-ovulatory phase. Okay, some of you may find it difficult to see, so just focus on what I'm saying. So follicular phase or proliferative phase or pre-ovulatory phase, these are the name for the same thing. Great. Now, third and the last phase of menstrual cycle lasts from the day of ovulation, okay, or after ovulation, that is day 15 usually, up to the day 28 or 29, that is the last day. And this phase is called the luteal phase. Why? Because in this phase we will see that corpus luteum is formed. Okay, I hope you remember corpus luteum from the previous lecture, where we have seen how after ovulation the granulosa cells of the Graafian follicle turns into corpus luteum and starts to secrete progesterone mainly, right? So there is formation of this corpus luteum, hence this phase is called luteal phase. Okay. Secondly, at the same time, what happens is in this endometrium, okay, this endometrium lining becomes more secretory. So they start secreting certain materials which make this whole uterus very receptive for the implantation of the probable embryo. Okay, and hence we call it secretory phase. Why? Because in this phase, in this time duration, the endometrial lining is secretory in nature, more secretory in nature. Okay, so secretory phase. Okay, one more name has been given to this phase, and that is post-ovulatory phase. Obviously, because it occurs after ovulation. Okay, so post-ovulatory phase. Itna yaad rahega? Great. So this entire menstrual cycle is divided into 3 phases, that is menstrual phase or bleeding phase. Okay. Second is the follicular phase or proliferative phase or pre-ovulatory phase, and third one is the luteal phase or secretory phase or post-ovulatory phase. Great. Okay. Now, if pregnancy happens, okay, if there is fertilization, okay, if the pregnancy happens, in that case this cycle will not continue. This cycle will cease for a period of more than 9 months. Okay, like after the childbirth. So this whole process will cease unless and until childbirth has taken place. and in most of the time it will only resume after 2 to 3 months of the childbirth. Okay, but if there is no pregnancy, if pregnancy does not happen, in that case, after 29th day, the reproductive system, the reproductive organs of the female knows that there is no reproduction, there is no pregnancy, so this entire cycle, the purpose of this entire cycle has failed, so it scraps off everything. Okay, so it scraps off the extra lining that it has made on the endometrium. Okay, it degrades the corpus luteum. Okay, and starts a fresh cycle, a fresh menstrual cycle, hoping that it will lead to a pregnancy. Okay, and when this whole process initiates of removing this endometrial lining, the removed blood and tissue then starts to flow out from the uterus through the cervix and vagina outside the female body, and this is what the bleeding or menstrual phase is all about. Okay, so this takes around 3 to 5 days and entire thing is removed. Again, the endometrium lining becomes the thinnest, and since new cycle has already initiated, after it has become the thinnest, the extra layer has been removed, again a new cycle has started, so again it will start to make the endometrial lining. Okay, so again proliferation of the endometrium will occur and the cycle will continue. Okay, great. Let us see. So what happens during menstrual or bleeding phase? Okay, keep hearing me. So when we are talking of the menstrual phase, okay, when we are talking of menstrual phase or bleeding phase, see, all the ovarian and pituitary hormones, okay, all the ovarian and pituitary hormones, that is your FSH, LH, okay, or estrogen, progesterone, as well as the hormone of hypothalamus, that is GnRH, okay, are at their lowest level, so they are very low. Okay, so all these ovarian as well as the pituitary hormones are at their lowest level. Can you see from the diagram? Can you see here? Progesterone lowest level, estrogen lowest level, FSH is again low, LH is also low. Okay, so all are low. Great. Now, because all these hormones are low, what happens is this lower sex hormones, that is FSH, LH, estrogen and progesterone, it leads to the destabilizing of the endometrial lining. Okay, as a result, the endometrial lining starts to break. Okay, and once it starts to break, finally it will flow out, so the debris including blood and the tissue start to flow out through the vagina outside the body. Okay, so the bleeding phase is actually initiated because of the low level of FSH, LH, estrogen and progesterone, in particular progesterone. Okay, great. Now, how does it happen? Just keep listening to me. It may not be that relevant. What happens is once all these hormones level suddenly falls, prostaglandins are produced into the uterine tissue. Okay, and these prostaglandins act as a vasoconstrictor. Okay, and since they are vasoconstrictor, they will constrict the blood vessels supplying blood to the endometrium. Okay, now as this will constrict, the flow or the amount of blood flow into this endometrium will reduce. As a result, the tissue will start to die. They will start to degenerate. Okay, and once this extra layer of the tissue will not get the blood, they are dying, they are degenerating. Okay, then what happens is these prostaglandins also go and start to act on the myometrium, that is the middle layer of the uterus. Okay, and once they act on the myometrium, they will make the myometrium contract. Okay, and when the myometrium will contract, because of this mechanical vibrations, the degenerated and dead layer of this endometrium will start to break. They will start to slough off. Okay, so they will slough off and they will start to flow out of the uterus. Okay, so these debris and the blood, everything will start to flow out of the uterus through the vagina outside the body. Okay, now one more thing very important is, remember that the menstrual blood does not clot. Okay, this menstrual blood does not clot. It does not clot. Why? Because there is a particular enzyme. Okay, and this is fibrinolytic enzymes. So this menstrual blood has fibrinolytic enzymes. Okay, they have fibrinolytic enzymes, and because of the presence of these fibrinolytic enzymes, there will be no formation of fibrin. And if fibrin is not formed, you know clot will not form, right? You have already studied the mechanism of clot formation in class 11th. Right? So because of the presence of these fibrinolytic enzymes, the menstrual blood does not clot and it will flow out. Still, you will find some clumps into the menstrual blood, and it is so because these are the tissue debris of the endometrium. Okay, these are hardly these are clots. Actually, these are the tissue lumps. Okay, great. What else? What else is important here? The amount of blood that flows in each bleeding phase. Okay, so we see that around 80 ml of blood or blood cum tissue, everything flows out during bleeding phase. So per bleeding phase, I'm not saying per day or per hour, I'm saying per cycle. Okay, so you can say per month because it is a monthly cycle, right? और इसीलिए हिंदी में हम लोग menstrual cycle को बोलते हैं मासिक धर्म. Okay, मासिक because it is a monthly, right? So menstrual cycle is a monthly cycle, 28 days, close to 30, so every month, right? So per menstrual cycle, about 80 ml of blood is, or blood cum tissue is discharged during the bleeding phase. Great, this much you will remember. So this is about the menstrual phase. One more thing. Now, this menstrual phase, if you go in detail, can be again divided into two phases: initial phase and late phase. So initial phase, can you see here? Can you see here? So this part, sorry. So this part is the initial phase of the bleeding phase, okay, where because of prostaglandins, the blood supply to the endometrial tissue has been reduced. As a result, now they are dying, degenerating, okay, and then what happens? Contraction of myometrium, and then the dead layer will be sloughed off, and that is flowing out here from what, 3 to 5 days. So it takes around 3 to 5 days, okay, for complete removal of all the tissue, all the dead and degenerated endometrial tissue to be removed, to be flown out. Okay, great. Now let me tell you one more thing, very crucial. When do you count day 1 of this cycle? Okay, the day bleeding starts, the day menstrual cycle or the menstrual phase or the bleeding phase starts is counted as day 1. Okay, that is counted as day 1. Very often many of the females have this notion, wrong notion, that when the bleeding stops, that should be counted as day 1. No. Okay, day 1 is counted the very first day bleeding starts. Okay, so bleeding phase is the first phase of this menstrual cycle. So day 1 will be the day when bleeding will start. Okay, great. Now remember one more thing. When this bleeding phase start, it is actually the start of a new cycle. So when bleeding is going on, actually a new cycle has already started. Okay, great. Now see what happens next. During this menstrual phase, when all these ovarian hormones and pituitary hormones are at their lowest level, okay, the low level of estrogen, okay, so the low level of estrogen, what happens? This estrogen and progesterone low levels are going to give a negative feedback. They work by negative feedback mechanism. Okay, I hope you know the negative and positive feedback mechanism. So estrogen and progesterone work by negative feedback mechanism. So when their level is low, it is going to have a stimulatory effect, and when their level is high, they will have inhibitory effect. On whom? On hypothalamus and pituitary, particularly anterior lobe of pituitary. Okay, now all these things you can recall from your class 11th endocrine system chapter, okay, where you have studied about the chemical control and coordination. Okay, that was the last chapter, chemical control and coordination. Okay, so there we have already spoken of all these things, but yet, so estrogen and progesterone gave a negative feedback to the hypothalamus, okay, as well as to the anterior lobe of pituitary. Now when it gives to the hypothalamus in response is going to release GnRH. I hope you all remember GnRH. It is gonadotropin releasing hormone, and this hormone is going to act on pituitary, a positive effect on anterior pituitary, and as a result of this, the anterior pituitary will release FSH and LH, that is gonadotropins. Okay, so it is going to release gonadotropins. And what are gonadotropins? There are two gonadotropins, FSH and LH or ICSH. Great. Now here we are not talking of ICSH because ICSH is only found in males. Okay, in females there is LH. So we are going to talk of LH here. Great. Now this estrogen and progesterone also act in negative feedback mechanism on the anterior lobe of pituitary. Okay, so this ovarian hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone, have a negative feedback control on both hypothalamus as well as on the anterior pituitary. Okay, now listen very carefully. At lower level, okay, at lower level, estrogen, okay, estrogen promotes FSH. Okay, so at lower level, the estrogen act on the anterior pituitary. Okay, it act on the anterior pituitary and stimulate it to produce more FSH. Okay, more FSH and less LH. Great. Now after a critical point, when the estrogen level is high, this was low estrogen. When estrogen level is high, what happens? it will switch its role. Now it will act on anterior pituitary again, but as a result, FSH will be low and LH produced will be high. So remember this, that estrogen has different roles depending upon the concentration. Okay, if the estrogen level is low, then it stimulates the anterior pituitary to produce more of FSH and less of LH. Okay, when the estrogen level shoots up, what happens? It will induce again anterior pituitary to produce less of FSH and more of LH. Okay, something more is here. If the estrogen level is further increased, then what will happen? It will have a negative role on hypothalamus, negative feedback on hypothalamus. As a result, GnRH will be stopped. Okay, and if GnRH will be stopped, then it will not give command to the pituitary, right? As a result, pituitary will stop the production of gonadotropins. That is, both FSH and LH will be suppressed. Their secretion will be suppressed. Okay, याद रहेगा. So estrogen, on the basis of its level, the concentration level, has different effects. If the estrogen level is very low, then it leads to more secretion of FSH. If estrogen is moderate in amount, then it will make the secretion of LH, okay, and less of FSH. If it is very high, then it will suppress the production of both FSH and LH. Okay, and all this is done by negative feedback mechanism controlling hypothalamus and the anterior lobe of pituitary. Great, इतना याद रहेगा, please ये याद रखिएगा, it is key. Now let us see. So I have said that, well, yeah, what we have said already, that when the bleeding phase is going on, it is already a next cycle that has been initiated. Okay, and in the bleeding phase, all these hormones were at their lowest level or were in very low amount. Great. Since estrogen is also less, what it will do? It will go and induce the hypothalamus to produce GnRH, right? As a result, hypothalamus to produce GnRH. Now GnRH will come and induce the anterior pituitary to produce gonadotropins. Right? Now gonadotropins are 2, FSH and LH, but at this time the estrogen is also stimulating the anterior pituitary to produce more of FSH and less of LH. Correct? And that's why at initial conditions, see here, FSH, the red line, is more. Can you see? FSH is higher in amount than LH. So याद रखिएगा इस चीज को, that initially in a menstrual cycle the amount of FSH is higher than LH. Okay, great. Now what happens? You know that the FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, so it will stimulate the follicles, ovarian follicles. Actually it will go and act on the primordial follicle. See here, it will go, the FSH here, this FSH will come and start acting on the primordial follicle. Now every month when a menstrual cycle initiates in an ovary, okay, around 6 to 12 primordial follicles begins their journey. Okay, remember how many? 6 to 12. So around 6 to 12, let me increase this and increase a little bit of this. Yeah, so 6 to 12 primordial follicles will start to grow. They will start their journey under the influence of FSH. So follicle stimulating hormone will come and it will stimulate around 6 to 12 primordial follicles. They will start to grow, right? Now out of these 6 to 12, only 1 to 2 primordial follicle will be able to get converted into secondary follicle, okay, secondary ovarian follicle. What happens to the rest of the around 10-11 primordial follicles? They get degenerated, okay, and these degenerated follicles will be engulfed by the phagocytes present in the ovary. Okay, so all these primordial follicles which fail to become the secondary follicle will go towards the inner side of the ovary, that is called stroma, okay, and in the stroma side it will be engulfed by the phagocytes. Okay, now these 1 or 2 which have become the secondary follicle, now out of these 2 only 1 will become tertiary follicle, okay, and that will become the Graafian follicle later. Okay, समझ में आ रहा है? Now all these follicles or the secondary follicle which fails to become tertiary follicle, now this bigger follicle also has to die, okay, and this dying follicle is called atretic follicle. What? Let me write it for you. We call it, okay, I'm omitting this. We call such follicle atretic follicle. Okay, we call it atretic follicle, and these are usually found towards the stroma of the ovary. Okay, atretic follicle. We also call it folliculi atresia. Okay, these are the same thing, more of Latin and English. Okay, so atretic follicles. याद रखिएगा इस चीज को. There could be a MCQ asking atretic follicle, and then you might be thinking, what is this? This is nothing but a follicle that has failed to become Graafian follicle. Okay, great. Now what is happening here is, as the follicle grows, okay, so as this follicle grows from primordial to primary, then to secondary to tertiary, what happens? Okay, we have seen already. What happens is the number of these granulosa cells, okay, the layer of membrana granulosa, the follicular cells, the number of follicular cells gradually increase. At the same time, what happens? The theca, okay, the theca layer also increase. Great. Now, so as the follicle develops from primordial to Graafian follicle, the number of follicular cells in the membrana granulosa gradually increase. At the same time, the stromal cells that are found in the theca layer also gradually increase. Great. Now let me tell you, previous lecture we have said that the theca interna is mainly responsible for the secretion of estrogen. Let me tell you something more about it. What happens is, these stromal cells produce androgen. Okay, now androgen is male sex hormone, and later these follicular cells convert this androgen into estrogen and progesterone. Okay, so finally these cells of ovarian follicle are responsible for secretion of ovarian hormone, that is estrogen and progesterone. Okay, great. Now initially the ovarian follicles, okay, initially means still they have not become the corpus luteum. Okay, when they are still ovarian follicle, these cells produce more of estrogen, okay, and very less amount of progesterone. याद रहेगा? Great. So they mainly secrete estrogen and very less amount of progesterone. Now what happens? You see, as this follicle is growing in size, can you see? As this follicle is growing in size, as it is growing from primordial to Graafian follicle, the number of such cells are increasing. Therefore, the amount of their secretion will also increase. That is gradually what happens. The amount of estrogen gradually increase. Can you see? And I have told you, as the estrogen level will increase, the function or the effect of estrogen will change. Now, at a particular estrogen concentration, now estrogen will effect on the pituitary to produce more of LH and less of FSH. Okay, as a result, the LH amount, the amount of LH increases as compared to FSH. Can you see here? The FSH amount has shoots up the level of FSH, right? Yaad rahega? So this crossover is formed because LH shoots up the level of FSH, and this happens because of increasing concentration of estrogen. Okay, so as the Graafian follicle, as the ovarian follicles increase considerably in size, that is when they become about tertiary follicle by the 10th day. So this happens at around 10th day. Okay, the NCERT diagram is wrong in this sense. So this particular crossing over happens at this point, not at this point. This is wrong in this NCERT book. Okay, now see, this is tertiary follicle at day 10. Okay, and when tertiary follicle is formed, there are a lot of follicular cells, so they will produce more of estrogen. The estrogen level has shooted up. As a result, now amount of FSH will decrease and amount of LH will increase. As a result, the crossing over will take place. Okay, so this happens at 10th day. याद रखिएगा, पूछा जाता है नीट में. Okay, कि at which day of the menstrual cycle the amount of LH shoots up the amount of FSH, or when this crossing over takes place. It is at day 10 averagely. Okay, याद रखेंगे इस बात को. चलिए, so this increases at day 10. Why it happens? It happens to avoid the chances of formation of more than one ovum. See, if there is higher FSH, then it will keep inducing the primordial follicle towards development. Now, once one ovarian follicle in one cycle has reached to tertiary cycle stage, we do not want any other follicle in the development phase, and hence we do not want this FSH. Okay, and that's why it is very crucial that FSH amount goes down, LH comes up. समझ में आ रहा? So in order to avoid the chances of formation of more than one ovum per cycle, this crossing over is required. Okay, चलिए. So this crossing over takes place, and now LH amount is more than FSH. Great. Now LH has some distinctive function. See, FSH, right? FSH has a role in development of the follicle, but LH, luteinizing hormone, has a role in the maturation of the follicle. So the tertiary follicle, now under the effect of luteinizing hormone LH, it will become Graafian follicle. Okay. At the same time, under the effect of LH only, it will undergo the process of ovulation. Okay, how? We will see again. Now, meanwhile, see, the number of cells has already increased. The number of follicular cells and the stromal cells in the ovarian follicle has already increased. Okay, under the effect of LH, these cells have developed as well. This tertiary follicle has developed into Graafian follicle, and the secretion of such cells have also increased. As a result, the amount of estrogen is maximum here. Can you see the amount of estrogen is maximum. Okay, now at this level, the estrogen has already given a lot of signal to the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. As a result, there has been a surge in GnRH. Okay, and consequently there is a surge in the amount of the pituitary hormones, that is LH and FSH. See here. So what happens at around day 14, there is a surge in the amount of LH as well as FSH. However, notice that the amount of FSH increase is only about 2 to 3 times. Okay, whereas the amount of FSH surge, the amount of FSH surge is only about 2 to 3 times, but the amount of LH surge is around 6 to 10 times. Okay, this is called LH surge. This is called LH surge. Okay, now this LH surge leads to the rupture of Graafian follicle, leading to ovulation. Okay, it does not only lead to rupture of Graafian follicle, it also leads to the rupture of the ovarian wall. As a result, the ovulation takes place. Okay, and this happens at the mid of the cycle, that is day 14. So this everything is happening at day 14. Common question, ovulation कब हो रहा है? At day 14. याद रखेंगे इस बात को, please. It is very important. क्यों हो रहा है? It is induced by the LH surge. Okay. Now, once this ovulation has taken place, now the follicular cells have become corpus luteum. Okay. How they become corpus luteum? Actually, these follicular cells get deposition of lutein. Okay, now lutein is a yellow colored compound. Okay, and hence we call it corpus luteum. And now these follicular cells produce progesterone, more of progesterone and very small amount of estrogen. See, again the role has reversed. Earlier it was more estrogen, less progesterone. Now once the corpus luteum has formed, it is more of progesterone and less of estrogen. Okay, great. Now this was the follicular phase up to day 14. Okay, we were saying up to day 14 the ovulation part. Meanwhile, so this what we have seen is what is going on inside the ovary with these hormones. Okay. Meanwhile, what happens is under the action or effect of FSH, the endometrial lining starts to proliferate. Okay, and this proliferation of endometrial lining leads to the thickening of endometrial lining as well as a lot of vascularization. Okay, so it becomes highly vascularized. Can you see here? There is a lot of blood vessels. Okay, and it becomes thick. So highly vascularized and thick. At the same time, the layer of the myometrium also develops a little bit, so it becomes thicker. So if you see the entire uterine wall, it becomes very thick. Okay, the overall uterine wall thickness increases a lot, especially the endometrial lining thickness increases considerably. Okay, now because of the FSH, now LH also has some role here. LH will LH will lead to the formation of corpus luteum. As a result, a lot of progesterone is formed, right? And now this progesterone, see, estrogen increase the thickness, proliferation of the endometrial lining. Progesterone will help in the maintenance of this endometrial lining. Okay. Pardon me if I have mistakenly said FSH earlier. Okay, so actually it is estrogen that is responsible for the proliferation of the endometrial lining, okay, vascularization of the endometrial lining, and this proliferation and vascularization of endometrial lining or increase in thickness of the endometrial lining is called endometrial hyperplasia. Okay, it is called endometrial hyperplasia. Okay, so this endometrial hyperplasia is going on when this ovarian follicles were developing. Remember, see here, this part, when this ovarian follicles were developing, at the same time there was proliferation in the uterine wall, and this all was under the effect of estrogen mainly. Now what happens? After ovulation, corpus luteum is formed, and this corpus luteum starts to produce more of progesterone, and hence see the progesterone level shoots up. Okay, so this progesterone level shoots up. Okay, the progesterone level shoots up and the estrogen level decreases. Right now, this progesterone is responsible for maintaining the endometrial lining. Okay, it is maintaining, it helps in maintenance of endometrial hyperplasia. At the same time, what it does extra is it makes the endometrial lining more secretory. Okay, so it starts to secrete useful things. Okay, and these things make the endometrium more receptive for the probable implantation. Okay, now this corpus luteum stays there for about 9 days. Okay, actually this corpus luteum may have two fates. It depends on the condition. If fertilization have taken place, okay, if fertilization has taken place, then what happens, within a week of fertilization, the embryo will be implanted. Okay, and its implanted cells, especially the chorionic cells, will start to secrete a hormone called HCG. Okay, human chorionic gonadotropin. Okay, so this human chorionic gonadotropin HCG will then come and will help in maintenance of this corpus luteum for next about 3 months. Okay, or throughout the pregnancy. Not throughout, mainly up to 3 months, and then its role is taken over by some other things. Okay, so then it will be maintained for around 3 months. If pregnancy or fertilization has not occurred, in that case there will be no HCG. Okay, and in the absence of human chorionic gonadotropin, that is HCG, this corpus luteum only stays there for about 9 days. Okay, now 14 plus 9 is 23, so only for about 23 days. From 23 day onwards, it starts to self-degenerate. Okay, and when it will degenerate, the amount of progesterone will decrease. Can you see here? The amount of progesterone will decrease. As a result, also the amount of estrogen will decrease. As a result, what will happen? Again, since there is lower level of hormones, the hormones are not present there, prostaglandins will be secreted in the uterine wall. Okay, and that will lead to the initiation of bleeding phase. Okay, so this is the whole cycle. This keeps on going. Once this bleeding starts, the body knows that the purpose of this whole cycle has not been completed, so it will abolish everything, all the preparation that the body has made, and initiate a fresh cycle. That is, a new cycle will be initiated with the bleeding phase. Okay, so this is menstrual cycle. Now, as I said earlier, that there are some mistakes in the NCERT figure for menstrual cycle. Now I have this another figure. Okay, this figure is having the correct depiction of the levels of all the hormones during the menstrual cycle. Okay, now you see here, as we have said earlier, okay, this crossing over takes place at around 10th day. Can you see? So at around 10th day. So this crossing over, that is when the FSH level decreases as compared to LH. Okay, so this occurs at 10th day. Also, we have said that we will also look at the inhibin levels. So this green line is for inhibin, and this inhibin is produced by the corpus luteum itself. Okay, and when you look at this level, this inhibin is being produced by this follicular cells. Okay, so when you look at this level, initially it is low, but in corpus luteum, when it starts to degenerate, again when it matures, its level shoots up. Can you see? At day 21 or so, it shoots up, it is maximum. And when the inhibin level is maximum, it have a negative effect on the amount of FSH. Okay, so the amount of FSH will decrease because of inhibin. Also, some amount of LH is also decreased. So this inhibin goes and it functions on the hypothalamus, give a negative feedback. Okay, and it asks the hypothalamus to stop the production of GnRH. As a result, the FSH and LH amount decreases. Mainly it decreases the amount of FSH. Okay, why? Because this is the time when the body is still awaiting for fertilization, and you don't want another development of follicle at this time. Correct? Now, when this corpus luteum does not find HCG, it means there is no fertilization. Then they will start to die, and the level of inhibin also decreases. When it decreases, then again the GnRH will be produced and more of FSH and LH will be produced, and the whole process will be initiated once again. Okay, so this diagram shows the correct depiction of the level of ovarian hormones and the pituitary hormones in case of menstrual cycle. Okay, great. Now, as I said, that this cycle is repeated, okay, every 28 to 29 days. Now, if there is fertilization and pregnancy occurs, in that case, obviously this cycle ceases, it stops. Okay, it does not continue further, okay, till the childbirth. After 2-3 months of childbirth, again it will be back on track, and again this cycle will keep going on. But for the duration of pregnancy, this cycle, menstrual cycle, ceases. Okay, therefore the skipping of a menstrual cycle is considered as one of the sign of pregnancy. Okay, so if a adult female skips her menstrual cycle, then there is a probability that she is pregnant. Okay, however, it is not a confirmatory test. Why? Because in many cases we find that under stress or physical mental conditions, okay, in certain environmental conditions, women skip their menstrual cycle, okay, or there is a delay in the menstrual cycle. Okay, now in that case, the menstrual cycle has been either skipped or there is a delay without fertilization, okay, without pregnancy. Therefore, skipping or delay in menstrual cycle is only a sign for pregnancy, and it cannot be taken as a confirmatory test. Okay, great. What is the confirmatory test for pregnancy then? The confirmatory test is the checking of of this hormone level in the blood called HCG, and later in urine. So as an early marker of pregnancy, one should check the HCG level in blood, that is human chorionic gonadotropin. Okay, this is being produced by the implanted embryo. Okay, so if there is an implanted embryo, for sure the female is pregnant, right? So in very early pregnancy, this level should be checked into blood. Later, it can be checked in blood and urine, especially the early morning urine. Okay? All these commercials that you see these days on your television of Prega News and other these small kits, which you can do at home, these all are based on this hormone HCG. What they are doing, they are detecting the amount of HCG in your urine. Okay, great. So the take home message is skipping off menstrual cycle is only a sign of pregnancy. It is not a confirmatory test. Yaad rahega? Great. Apart from that, one more thing. You know that this menstrual cycle only goes at a particular age, okay? And when the female reaches around 45 to 50 years of age, it depends from again person to person. So from 45 to 50 years of age, this cycle stops naturally, okay, without any pregnancy or anything. This cycle ceases in a female, and after that it will not occur. Okay, now this cessation of menstrual cycle is called menopause. याद रहेगा, मीनो is for menstrual cycle और play pause तो आप जानती हो रुक गया. ओके, लेकिन यहाँ पे pause जो है ये stop की तरह है, इसके बाद से ये resume नहीं होता. Okay, so menopause is the phenomena of cessation, permanent cessation of menstrual cycle in a female, which in general occurs at the age of 45 to 50 years. Okay, so I hope you all have understood this menstrual cycle, okay, and the effect of hormones, okay, how they function on this. These are a little bit tricky, so I would advise you to sit at your home, okay, and make a flow chart, okay, of this whole process. Okay, so when what is happening in the ovary or with the ovarian follicle as well as with the uterine lining, and how these 5 hormones are changing with each other or with that event, right? So try to make it and try to also see the level of one hormone, how it is affecting the other hormone level or the development of ovarian follicle as well as the proliferation of the endometrial lining. Okay, so do this exercise that will help you to better understand this whole process. Now it is very important because there has been always questions from this topic. So I would really recommend or advise all of you to do this exercise. If you are not doing it, there is a good probability that the question will make you or you will fall prey of the questions, really good questions. Okay, so do it. And if you have any doubt, again, you know how to contact me or get your query done. Well, so see you in the next video lecture. Stay tuned and stay safe. Thank you.